Mark Twain once said, "It is not worthwhile to try to keep history from repeating itself, for man's character will always make the preventing of the repetitions impossible." Perhaps that is why on July the 28th in Ypres, Berlin, Paris, London, Moscow, Washington, and several other places, the 100-year anniversary of the outbreak of the First World War will be commemorated. For 4 long years, between 1914 and 1918, the nations of Europe, the United States and Australia fought each other, each country desperately clinging on to its hope for the final victory. Never had a war had such an enormous impact on Europe and the world. After the war had ended and the heavily weakened German Empire had conceded defeat, bringing to an end years of bloodshed, roaring machine guns, deafening explosions and disease, Germany was forced to accept harsh, unforgiving terms. And as Germany slipped away into darkness and chaos, Europe was left in disarray. But while the Great War had left great scars and meant the death of so many things, it meant the birth of so many others. The absolute monarchies, with their endless bickering and disputes, saw their power and influence curbed. Europe's political and economic landscape had been completely reshaped beyond recognition. As a result of expulsion, entire communities were forced to seek refuge in far, new lands. This left discontent and a feeling of hopelessness, as well as economic catastrophes. It was even said that people needed wheelbarrows full of money just to buy what they needed. With dwindling faith in the government's ability to provide security and stability, the peoples of Europe increasingly found hope and identity in new revolutionary ideologies. Thus, the seeds for the Second World War were already being sown. And in little more than just 20 years' time, Europe was once again plunged into yet another devastating world war. Had the war to end all wars effectively ended all wars in the long run? For 70 years, Europe has now been at peace. Ever since the Treaty of Paris in 1951, Europe has been growing into a cooperative network of democracies that has increasingly made a further inter-European war unthinkable. So did those millions of soldiers not die in vain? Perhaps the tragedy of the First World War did help to bring peace and prosperity to the people, at least in the long run. I'm sure that everyone here would like to think so. Sadly, however, tensions in between the members of the European Union have been rising in recent years. Once again, we are seeing economic crisis provoking a growing tendency towards both nationalism and other extremist movements. The average European unemployment rate is at a staggering 12.30%, which is around 27 million people. 27 million unemployed Europeans. Polls conducted in France, Spain, and Italy show that significant numbers of Europeans believe that Germany has too much power. And as well as that, magazines in Greece have responded to the impossible economic burdens imposed by European legislation by picturing German Chancellor Angela Merkel in Nazi uniform. Are these prejudices blocking proper cooperation in Europe? Are we once again heading towards the same situation we were in 100 years ago? Will the memories of the First World War fend off the escalation to nationalism? Or was Mark Twain right that it is not worthwhile to try to keep history from repeating itself? For man's character will always, always make the preventing of the repetitions impossible. I do agree with Mark Twain that history is a never-ending cycle of events, nearly repetitive, but then again, never quite the same. But I hope that the concepts of democracy, of free elections and universal emancipation have now become so strongly embedded that this time history cannot take the same course as it did. It is for this reason that we must keep the poppies alive, commemorating year after year the tragedies and the horrors of the First World War. Remembering the mistakes made in the past is crucial to avoiding the repeating of disasters now and in the future. This I believe, offers Europe our best chance of emerging from this crisis peacefully as an ever stronger, more cohesive European Union. Thank you very much.
What's your opinion about the news that we are going to enter a new Cold War?
Well, there are many theories that actually would say that the Cold War never really ended. The enemy, as in our opinion, the USSR did break up, but Vladimir Putin, as we know him now, is not really the most, Western-friendly man alive. And I think if you would look at it as if that the Cold War never ended, we're maybe just reaching a point now when it's going to start to escalate again, especially with the Crimea situation is problematic, and the nearly isolationist attitude of America and the European Union that just doesn't have the power and the strength to actually stand up against Putin could create an escalation in the situation.
Can democracy keep radicalization in check? Because now we are seeing in France a rising popularity of the Front National.
Yeah.
So is democracy really a safeguard against radical parties?
Well, that is an interesting question, because actually democracy gives way to these radical parties. It is only through democracy that these parties can actually gain power, as in France, Greece, Hungary, UKIP in Britain, and even in Germany now, once again, the NPD. Democracy lets everybody speak their mind, which is a great thing. But in times of need like this, people with less positive opinions can come to power, like, for example, Marine Le Pen and her Front National, and democracy is maybe not the best shield for it. It is the correct way of ruling, like Mr. De Ridder said, I think so. And it probably won't stop it, but it is the right way to do it.
You said that World War II brought peace to Europe. If we would know that something was worth, if we would know that we would get positive results, is it worth fighting for?
Well, I meant the First World War. That there's a theory that says that the first and the second, like again, Mr. De Ridder said, is actually just one entity, and I don't think the people at the moment were fighting for. I mean, in the First World War, it was called the Great War to end all wars, and people were fighting for it. But nowadays, people would just say that, oh, all those millions of soldiers, they died in vain. They died for countries that don't exist anymore, for the German empires and all that. But what they achieved now is something that was that couldn't be possible 100 years ago. So maybe they wouldn't have known it at the moment, but what they did, they sacrificed lives for ours, actually.
You talked about a tension between all the countries of the United Nations. How can we diffuse this tension?
How can we?
Diffuse it?
How could we do that? Yeah. Well, like I said, democracy isn't really the way to do it, but just hold fast. Keep on to our European principles, and just stick together and hope for the best. And it should pass. It will pass if we just stick together and keep to our European principles. And that's all I can say about that. If it answers your question.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Vogt.
Welcome.